The Republican Party, commonly referred to as the GOP, is one of the two major contemporary political parties in the United States, the other being its historic rival, the Democratic Party. Founded by anti-slavery activists, modernists, ex-Whigs, and ex-Free Soilers in 1854, the Republicans dominated politics nationally and in the majority of northern states for most of the period between 1860 and 1932. There have been 18 Republican presidents, the first being Abraham Lincoln, who served from 1861 until his assassination in 1865, and the most recent being George W. Bush, who served from 2001 to 2009. The most recent Republican presidential nominee is former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney, who lost in 2012 to Democratic incumbent Barack Obama. The party's platform is generally based on American conservatism, in contrast to the modern American liberalism of the Democrats. The Republican Party's conservatism involves support for free market capitalism, free enterprise business, a strong national defense, deregulation, restrictions on labor unions, social conservative policies, and traditional values, usually with Christian overtones. The party is generally split on the issue of how to deal with illegal immigration. In the 114th United States Congress, Republicans have their largest majority in the House of Representatives since the 1928 election and a majority of seats in the Senate. The party also holds a majority of governorships and state legislatures. Specifically, 68 out of 98 partisan state legislative chambers have Republican majorities. History. Founding in 19th century. Founded in the northern states in 1854 by anti-slavery activists, modernizers, ex-Whigs, and ex-Free Soilers. The Republican Party quickly became the principal opposition to the dominant Democratic Party and the briefly popular Know Nothing Party. The main cause was opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which repealed the Missouri Compromise by which slavery was kept out of Kansas. The Northern Republicans saw the expansion of slavery as a great evil. The first public meeting where the name Republican was suggested for a new anti-slavery party was held on March 20, 1854 in a schoolhouse in Ripon, Wisconsin. The name was partly chosen to pay homage to Thomas Jefferson's Republican Party. The first official party convention was held on July 6, 1854, in Jackson, Michigan. By 1858, the Republicans dominated nearly all northern states. The Republican Party first came to power in 1860 with the election of Lincoln to the presidency and Republicans in control of Congress and again, the northern states. It oversaw the preserving of the Union, the end of slavery, and the provision of equal rights to all men in the American Civil War and Reconstruction, 1861 to 1877. The Republicans' initial base was in the Northeast and the Upper Midwest. With the realignment of parties and voters in the third-party system, the strong run of John C. Fremont in the 1856 United States presidential election demonstrated it dominated most northern states. Early Republican ideology was reflected in the 1856 slogan, "Free Labor, Free Land, Free Men," which had been coined by Salmon P. Chase, a senator from Ohio. Free labor referred to the Republican opposition to slave labor and belief in independent artisans and businessmen. Free land referred to Republican opposition to plantation system whereby slave owners could buy up all the good farmland, leaving the yeoman independent farmers the leftovers. The party strived to contain the expansion of slavery, which would cause the collapse of the slave power and the expansion of freedom. Lincoln, representing the fast-growing western states, won the Republican nomination in 1860 and subsequently won the presidency. The party took on the mission of preserving the Union and destroying slavery during the American Civil War and over Reconstruction. In the election of 1864, it united with war Democrats to nominate Lincoln on the National Union Party ticket. The party's success created factionalism within the party in the 1870s. Those who felt that Reconstruction had been accomplished and was continued mostly to promote the large-scale corruption tolerated by President Ulysses S. Grant ran Horace Greeley for the presidency. The stalwarts defended Grant and the spoils system. The half-breeds pushed for reform of the civil service. The Republican Party supported business generally, hard money, high tariffs to promote economic growth, high wages and high profits, generous pensions for Union veterans, and the annexation of Hawaii. The Republicans supported the pietistic Protestants who demanded prohibition. As the northern postbellum economy boomed with heavy and light industry, railroads, mines, fast-growing cities and prosperous agriculture, the Republicans took credit and promoted policies to sustain the fast growth. Nevertheless, by 1890 the Republicans had agreed to the Sherman Antitrust Act and the Interstate Commerce Commission in response to complaints from owners of small businesses and farmers. The high McKinley tariff of 1890 hurt the party, and the Democrats swept to a landslide in the off-year elections, even defeating McKinley himself. After the two terms of Democrat Grover Cleveland, the election of William McKinley in 1896 is widely seen as a resurgence of Republican dominance and is sometimes cited as a realigning election. McKinley promised that high tariffs would end the severe hardship caused by the Panic of 1893, and that Republicans would guarantee a sort of pluralism in which all groups would benefit. 20th century. The 1896 realignment cemented the Republicans as the party of big business, while Theodore Roosevelt added more small business support by his embrace of trust-busting. He handpicked his successor William Howard Taft in 1908, but they became enemies on economic issues. Defeated by Taft for the 1912 nomination, Roosevelt bolted the party and led the third-party ticket of the Progressive Party. The Republicans returned to the White House throughout the 1920s, running on platforms of normalcy, business-oriented efficiency, and high tariffs. The National Party avoided the prohibition issue after it became law in 1920. Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover were resoundingly elected in 1920, 1924, and 1928 respectively. The Teapot Dome scandal threatened to hurt the party, but Harding died and Coolidge blamed everything on him. As the opposition splintered in 1924, the pro-business policies of the decade seemed to produce an unprecedented prosperity until the Wall Street crash of 1929 heralded the Great Depression. New Deal era. The New Deal coalition of Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt controlled American politics for most of the next 3 decades, excepting the two-term presidency of Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower. Blacks moved into the Democratic Party during the New Deal era. They could vote in the North but not in the South. After Roosevelt took office in 1933, New Deal legislation sailed through Congress and the economy moved sharply upward from its nadir in early 1933. However, long-term unemployment remained a drag until 1940. In the 1934 midterm elections, 10 Republican senators went down to defeat, leaving them with only 25 against 71 Democrats. The House of Representatives likewise had overwhelming Democratic majorities. The Republican Party split into a majority alt-right and a liberal wing based in the Northeast that supported much of the New Deal. The alt-right sharply attacked the Second New Deal, and said it represented class warfare and socialism. Roosevelt was re-elected in a landslide in 1936, but everything went awry in his second term, as the economy plunged, strikes soared, and FDR failed to take control of the Supreme Court or to purge the Southern conservatives in the Democratic Party. Republicans made a major comeback in the 1938 elections, and had new rising stars such as Robert A. Taft of Ohio on the right and Thomas E. Dewey of New York on the left. Southern conservatives joined with most Republicans to form the Conservative Coalition, which dominated domestic issues in Congress until 1964. Both parties split on foreign policy issues. with the anti-war isolationists dominant in the Republican Party and the interventionists who wanted to stop Hitler dominant in the Democratic Party. Roosevelt won a third and fourth term in 1940 and 1944. Conservatives abolished most of the New Deal during the war, but did not attempt to reverse Social Security or the agencies that regulated business. Historian George H. Nash argues, unlike the moderate, internationalist, largely Eastern Bloc of Republicans who accepted some of the Roosevelt Revolution and the essential premises of President Truman's foreign policy, the Republican right at heart was counter-revolutionary, anti-collectivist, anti-communist, anti-New Deal, passionately committed to limited government, free market economics, and congressional prerogatives. The GOP. Conservatives were obliged from the start to wage a constant two-front war against liberal Democrats from without and Me Too Republicans from within. The Democrats elected majorities to Congress almost continuously after 1932, but the conservative coalition blocked practically all major liberal proposals in domestic policy. After 1945, the internationalist wing of the GOP cooperated with Harry Truman's Cold War foreign policy, funded the Marshall Plan, and supported NATO, despite the continued isolationism of the old right. The second half of the 20th century saw election or succession of Republican presidents Dwight D. Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan, George H. W. Bush and George W. Bush. Eisenhower had defeated conservative leader Senator Robert A. Taft for the 1952 nomination, but conservatives dominated the domestic policies of the Eisenhower administration. Voters liked Ike much more than they liked the GOP, and he proved unable to shift the party to a more moderate position. After 1970, the liberal wing faded away. Ever since he left office in 1989, Reagan has been the iconic Republican, and Republican presidential candidates frequently claim to share his views and aim to establish themselves and their policies as the more appropriate heir to his legacy. In 1994, the party, led by House Minority Whip Newt Gingrich campaigning on the contract with America, was elected to majorities to both houses of Congress in the Republican Revolution. However, Gingrich was unable to deliver on most of its promises, and after the impeachment of President Bill Clinton in 1998 and subsequent Republican losses in the House, he resigned. Since Reagan's day, presidential elections have been close. However, the Republican presidential candidate won a majority of the popular vote only in 2004, while coming in second in 1992, 1996, 2000, 2008 and 2012. 21st century. The Senate majority lasted until 2001, when the Senate became split evenly but was regained in the 2002 elections. Both Republican majorities in the House and Senate were held until the Democrats regained control in the midterm elections of 2006. The Republican Party has since been defined by social conservatism, a preemptive war foreign policy intended to defeat terrorism and promote global democracy, a more powerful executive branch, supply-side economics, support for gun ownership, and deregulation. In the presidential election of 2008, the party's nominees were Senator John McCain, of Arizona, for president and Alaska Governor Sarah Palin for vice president. They were defeated by Senator Barack Obama of Illinois and Senator Joe Biden of Delaware. In 2009, Republicans Chris Christie and Bob McDonnell were elected to the governorships of New Jersey and Virginia. 2010 was a year of electoral success for the Republicans, starting with the upset win of Scott Brown in the Massachusetts special Senate election for the seat held for many decades by the Democratic Kennedy brothers. In the November elections, Republicans recaptured control of the House, increased their number of seats in the Senate, and gained a majority of governorships. Additionally, Republicans took control of at least 19 Democratic-controlled state legislatures. In the presidential election of 2012, the Republican nominees were former Governor Mitt Romney of Massachusetts for president, and Representative Paul Ryan of Wisconsin for vice president. The Democrats nominated incumbents Barack Obama and Joe Biden. The campaign focused largely on the Affordable Care Act and President Obama's stewardship of the economy, with the country facing high unemployment numbers and a rising national debt 4 years after his first election. Romney and Ryan were defeated by Obama and Biden. In addition, in the November congressional elections, while Republicans lost 7 seats in the House, they retained control. However, Republicans were not able to gain control of the Senate, continuing their minority status with a net loss of 2 seats. By September 2014, the Republican Party was confident of making gains in the November election and perhaps taking control of the Senate by gaining 6 seats. With a final total of 247 seats in the House and 54 seats in the Senate, the Republicans ultimately achieved their largest majority in the U.S. Congress since the 71st Congress in 1929. Electoral history: name and symbols. The party's founding members chose the name Republican Party in the mid-1850s as homage to the values of republicanism promoted by Thomas Jefferson's Republican Party. The idea for the name came from an editorial by the party's leading publicist Horace Greeley, who called for some simple name like Republican that would more fitly designate those who had united to restore the Union to its true mission of champion and promulgator of liberty rather than propagandist of slavery. The name reflects the 1776 Republican values of civic virtue and opposition to aristocracy and corruption. The term, Grand Old Party, is a traditional nickname for the Republican Party, and the abbreviation, GOP, is a commonly used designation. The term originated in 1875 in the Congressional Record, referring to the party associated with the successful military defense of the Union as this gallant old party. The following year, in an article in the Cincinnati Commercial, the term was modified to Grand Old Party. The first use of the abbreviation is dated 1884. The traditional mascot of the party is the elephant. A political cartoon by Thomas Nast, published in Harper's Weekly on November 7, 1874, is considered the first important use of the symbol. In the early 20th century, the usual symbol of the Republican Party in Midwestern states such as Indiana and Ohio was the bald eagle, as opposed to the Democratic rooster. After the 2000 election, the color red became associated with Republicans, although the party has not officially adopted it. That election night, for the first time, all of the major broadcast networks used the same color scheme for the electoral map. States won by Republican nominee George W. Bush were colored red, and states won by Democratic nominee Al Gore were colored blue. Although the assignment of colors to political parties is unofficial and informal, they have come to be widely recognized by the media to represent the respective political parties' structure and composition. The Republican National Committee is responsible for promoting Republican campaign activities. It is responsible for developing and promoting the Republican political platform, as well as coordinating fundraising and election strategy. Its current chairman is Reince Priebus. The chairman of the RNC is chosen by the president when the Republicans have the White House or otherwise by the party's state committees. The RNC, under the direction of the party's presidential candidate, supervises the Republican National Convention and raises funds for candidates. On the local level, there are similar state committees in every state and most large cities, counties and legislative districts, but they have far less money and influence than the national body. The Republican House and Senate caucuses have separate fundraising and strategy committees. They each raise over $100 million per election cycle, and play important roles in recruiting strong state candidates. While the Republican Governors Association assists in state gubernatorial races, in 2014 it is chaired by Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey.